Ritvik, Aanshi and Shardha Malhotra, along with Aanshi's distant cousin Meera, seemed like an ordinary Indian family living quietly in the suburbs of Ohio. But behind closed doors, obsession, manipulation, and deadly secrets were quietly unraveling, leading to a shocking tragedy no one saw coming. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Ritvik Malhotra had always believed that success meant leaving India and building a future in America. He grew up in a middle-class family in Indore, where expectations were heavy and comparisons were constant. When he received a job offer from an IT company in Ohio, his family saw it as a victory. Soon after settling in the USA, his marriage was arranged with Aanshi Verma, a quiet and emotional woman from Jaipur. The wedding was grand, and everyone believed the match was perfect. Ritvik was educated and earning well, while Aanshi was caring and respectful. After marriage, Aanshi left her parents, her friends, and everything familiar to start a new life thousands of miles away. America felt exciting to Ritvik but frightening to Aanshi. The wide roads, empty streets, and cold weather made her feel lost. She stayed inside the house most of the time while Ritvik went to work every day. With no job, no car, and no social circle, her days became long and lonely. She tried to adjust by cooking Indian food and decorating the house, hoping it would feel like home. At first, Ritvik appreciated her efforts. He posted pictures online that showed a happy married life. Outsiders believed they were living a dream. Slowly, small changes began to appear. Aanshi missed her family deeply, and the loneliness affected her mental health. She started eating more to comfort herself. Physical activity reduced, and the cold weather made it harder for her to go outside. Over time, she gained weight. At first, Ritvik ignored it. He was busy with his career and believed everything would fix itself. But as months passed, the change became noticeable. Ritvik began to feel uncomfortable, not because of concern, but because of how he thought others might judge him. He compared his life to other Indian couples in the community. He noticed how people talked about fitness and appearance. Without saying much, he started pulling away emotionally. His long work hours increased, and weekends were spent outside the house. Aanshi noticed the distance, but did not understand the reason. The house that once felt hopeful started feeling empty. Aanshi tried harder to please Ritvik, cooking special meals and maintaining routines, but her health kept declining. She felt tired, weak, and emotionally drained. She did not know how to ask for help, and Ritvik did not offer any. What began as a fresh start slowly turned into isolation. This chapter of their life looked normal from the outside. There were no loud arguments, no visible violence, and no complaints. But beneath the quiet routine, something dangerous was forming. The imbalance of power, the emotional neglect, and the pressure of expectations was slowly pushing the marriage toward a dark path. Neither of them knew that this new life in America was not the beginning of happiness, but the first step toward a tragic end. As time passed, Aanshi's body and mind began changing in ways she did not fully understand. The loneliness that once came and went slowly became permanent. Ritvik left early for work and returned late, often tired and distracted. The long hours alone pushed Aanshi deeper into her own thoughts. Food became her only comfort. She cooked large meals, not out of hunger, but to fill the silence inside the house. Eating gave her temporary relief, but the guilt followed soon after. Her weight increased steadily. Simple tasks like climbing stairs or standing for long periods became difficult. She started feeling breathless and weak. Some days she stayed in bed longer than usual, feeling drained without knowing why. She searched online for health advice, but felt overwhelmed by the information. Without friends or family nearby, she had no one to guide her. Her world slowly shrank to the walls of the house. Ritvik noticed these changes clearly. At first, he told himself it was temporary. He believed Aanshi would adjust with time, but instead of improvement, he saw what he considered failure. He began associating her weight with his own dissatisfaction. He worried about appearances during community gatherings and office events. He avoided inviting people home. The emotional gap between them widened silently. Ritvik's concern was not about Aanshi's health, but about control. He started monitoring her routine from a distance. He paid attention to how much she ate, how long she rested, and how little she moved. In his mind, her obesity became the root of every problem in his life. Stress at work, frustration at home, and his fatting attraction all blended into one blame. He never tried to understand the emotional pain behind her condition. Aanshi sensed the shift. She felt judged without being spoken to. Ritvik's behavior changed in subtle ways. His patience disappeared. His presence felt cold. Even when he was home, the house felt empty. Aanshi began blaming herself. She believed that if she could fix her body, everything would return to normal. This belief pushed her into unhealthy habits. She skipped meals some days and overate on others. Her health worsened instead of improving. Physically, her body started sending warnings. She experienced headaches, dizziness, and sudden weakness. Emotionally, she felt invisible. She stopped dressing up and avoided mirrors. The confident woman who once dreamed of a happy married life now struggled to recognize herself. Still, she remained silent. Cultural conditioning taught her to adjust, to endure, and to not complain. This silent struggle went unnoticed by the outside world. To neighbors and relatives, everything appeared normal. Ritvik continued his career and Aanshi stayed home. No one asked questions and no one looked closely enough to see the signs. But inside the house, the imbalance grew stronger. Obesity was no longer just a health issue. It became a symbol of power, control, and emotional neglect. This phase marked a dangerous turning point. What seemed like a personal struggle slowly transformed into something darker. Ritvik's growing resentment and Aanshi's silent suffering created a space where empathy no longer existed. In that silence, a tragedy was quietly taking shape, waiting for the moment when it would reveal itself. Shardha Malhotra arrived in the USA with traditional beliefs and strong opinions shaped by years of rigid thinking. She had always controlled her household in India, and distance had not softened her nature. From the moment she entered Ritvik's home, she began observing everything closely. The cleanliness, the food, the daily routine, and most of all, Aanshi. The physical change in her daughter-in-law was impossible to ignore, and Shardha formed her judgment immediately. Shardha did not see Aanshi's condition as a health issue. In her mind, it was laziness and lack of discipline. She believed a wife's responsibility was to maintain herself for her husband and protect the family's social image. America, according to her, had spoiled Aanshi. Instead of understanding the isolation and emotional strain, Shardha focused only on appearances. Her presence changed the atmosphere of the house within days. Ritvik, who had been silently carrying his frustration, found support in his mother's opinions. Shardha validated his thoughts and strengthened his resentment. What he once questioned privately now felt justified. Shardha's constant attention toward Aanshi's eating habits, resting time, and physical movement created an environment of pressure. Nothing Aanshi did felt sufficient. Every action was silently judged. Aanshi tried to adjust, believing that pleasing her mother-in-law would restore peace. She changed her cooking style, altered her routine, and attempted to follow strict schedules. Instead of appreciation, she faced constant dissatisfaction. The house felt smaller with Shardha's presence. Even simple daily activities became stressful. Aanshi's emotional state weakened further, and her health continued to decline. Shardha took control of household decisions. She rearranged routines and influenced Ritvik's mindset more deeply each day. She believed emotional softness was weakness and that discipline could fix any problem. Compassion had no place in her thinking. Ritvik, already distant from Aanshi, became more detached. The emotional connection between husband and wife almost disappeared. The mother-in-law's influence went beyond behavior. She slowly shifted Ritvik's priorities. She reminded him of family reputation, social respect, and future stability. Aanshi was no longer seen as a partner, but as an obstacle. Her obesity became the central topic around which every concern revolved. Shardha reinforced the idea that drastic problems required drastic solutions, even if they were uncomfortable. Aanshi felt trapped. She was far from her own family, dependent on people who no longer cared for her well-being. She sensed that something was wrong but could not identify what it was. The emotional coldness, the constant pressure, and the lack of support drained her strength. She became quieter, almost invisible within her own home. This period marked a critical shift. The arrival of Shardha did not just add another family member, it changed the power structure of the house. Ritvik's frustration turned into certainty, and Shardha's control became absolute. What once was emotional neglect now evolved into calculated influence. The foundation for something far more dangerous had been laid, hidden beneath routine and silence, waiting to unfold. The atmosphere inside the house grew heavier with each passing day. Shardha's presence turned daily life into a strict routine where nothing felt natural anymore. Meals were measured, rest was criticized, and silence filled every corner. Aanshi felt constantly watched, as if every movement was being judged. The home no longer felt like a safe place, but like a space where she had to prove her worth every moment. Shardha believed pressure would force change. She controlled the kitchen, decided what was cooked, and indirectly influenced how much Aanshi was allowed to eat. Food, once a comfort, became a source of anxiety. Aanshi's body reacted badly to sudden changes. Her weakness increased, and she often felt dizzy. Instead of concern, her condition was treated as exaggeration. Her health complaints were dismissed as excuses. Ritvik slowly stopped seeing Aanshi as someone who needed help. Under his mother's influence, he began viewing her as irresponsible and ungrateful. Emotional distance turned into emotional absence. He avoided spending time at home and left decisions to Shardha. When he was present, his attention felt mechanical, without warmth or connection. The marriage existed only on paper. The pressure affected Aanshi deeply. She began questioning her own value. She believed she had failed as a wife and a daughter-in-law. Her confidence disappeared completely. She stopped reaching out to her family in India, not wanting to worry them. She convinced herself that endurance was the only option. This silence became her greatest weakness. Physically, her condition worsened rapidly. Lack of proper nutrition and constant stress weakened her immune system. She started experiencing irregular sleep, frequent headaches, and sudden exhaustion. Some days, getting out of bed felt impossible. Yet, there was no medical attention, no emotional support, and no acknowledgement of her suffering. Her pain blended into the background of daily routine. Shardha continued shaping Ritvik's mindset with subtle reminders of responsibility and practicality. She emphasized financial security and long-term planning. Aanshi's declining health was seen as a liability rather than a concern. Ritvik stopped feeling guilt. He convinced himself that harshness was necessary. Compassion felt like a burden he no longer wanted to carry. The house became a place of emotional isolation. There were no arguments, no loud confrontations, only silence and cold routines. This quietness made everything appear normal from the outside. Neighbors noticed nothing unusual. The absence of visible conflict hid the growing danger within. This stage marked the complete loss of balance in the household. Aanshi no longer had any control over her own life. Decisions were made for her without her. Her identity faded as she became dependent and powerless. The emotional pressure had reached a point where empathy was completely erased. What looked like discipline and concern was actually something far more damaging. The combination of control, neglect, and manipulation created an environment where harm could happen without resistance. The house stood quiet, but beneath that calm surface, intentions were slowly hardening. This was the moment when emotional abuse quietly crossed into something far more irreversible. Financial pressure entered Ritvik's life quietly, but its impact was heavy. His job, once stable, became uncertain due to restructuring in the company. The fear of losing his position made him restless. He began calculating everything, from expenses to future responsibilities. In these calculations, Aanshi's condition was no longer seen as temporary. Ritvik started viewing her health as a permanent burden that would demand money, care, and time. This thought disturbed him deeply. Shardha noticed the change in her son's behavior and used it to strengthen her influence. She reminded him of responsibilities he would carry alone if Aanshi's health continued to decline. Medical bills, long-term care, and social embarrassment were repeatedly framed as unavoidable outcomes. Instead of seeing his wife as someone in need of help, Ritvik began seeing her as a risk to his future stability. During this period, Ritvik took out a large life insurance policy in Aanshi's name. On paper, it appeared responsible. He claimed it was meant to protect the family in case of a medical emergency. Shardha supported the decision fully. The policy details were kept private, and Aanshi was barely involved in the process. She signed documents without understanding their importance, trusting her husband's intentions. This financial step changed something inside Ritvik. The fear he once felt slowly transformed into calculation. He started thinking in terms of outcomes instead of emotions. Shardha's mindset reinforced this shift. She believed practical decisions mattered more than emotional attachment. In her view, suffering should not interfere with logic. Aanshi's health continued to decline during this time. She was often weak and disoriented. Instead of seeking medical help, Ritvik relied on home remedies and unverified health solutions. Shardha encouraged strict routines under the excuse of weight control. These changes further weakened Aanshi's body. She trusted the process, believing it would make her acceptable again. Ritvik began researching health supplements and medications online. Some of them were harmless, while others were dangerous when misused. The line between care and control blurred. He convinced himself that extreme steps were necessary. Shardha never questioned his actions. Her silence acted as approval. Emotionally, Ritvik detached completely. He stopped feeling connected to Aanshi as a person. She became a problem he needed to solve. The insurance policy sat quietly in the background, never discussed openly, but always present in his thoughts. It offered a sense of security that felt disturbingly comforting. Aanshi remained unaware of the growing danger. She believed the strict routines and treatments were meant for her improvement. Her trust became the final piece that made everything possible. The house continued to function normally, with no visible signs of chaos. This phase marked the transformation from neglect to intent. What began as frustration and control slowly evolved into planning. Financial security replaced emotional responsibility. The combination of fear, influence, and calculation pushed Ritvik toward a path from which there was no return. The solution he began imagining was silent, clean, and final, hidden behind responsibility and routine. Winter arrived early that year, covering the neighborhood in silence and snow. The cold outside matched the emotional emptiness inside the house. Aanshi's health had become fragile. Her body struggled to cope with the strict routines and unmonitored remedies she had been following for weeks. She felt weak most of the time, her movements slow and unsteady. Still, she trusted that what was happening was meant to help her improve. That evening followed the same pattern as every other. The house was quiet, and the routine was unchanged. Ritvik appeared calm and controlled. Shardha moved through the house with certainty, maintaining order and structure. Nothing seemed unusual, yet everything was carefully timed. The steps that led to the final outcome had been building for months, and now they moved forward without hesitation. Aanshi's body began reacting badly late into the night. Her breathing became shallow, and her strength faded rapidly. The substances introduced under the excuse of weight control had weakened her system beyond recovery. Her condition worsened quickly, leaving her unable to help herself. The silence of the house remained unbroken, hiding the severity of the moment. When emergency services were finally contacted, it was already too late. The response was slow, delayed just enough to ensure no reversal was possible. Ritvik presented the situation as a sudden health collapse linked to long-term obesity. Shardha supported the explanation calmly, maintaining composure. Their behavior appeared controlled, almost rehearsed. Medical authorities saw no immediate signs of violence. Aanshi's weight and weakened condition seemed to explain everything. The environment offered no visible clues of wrongdoing. Her death was recorded as natural, caused by health complications. The house returned to stillness, now heavier than before. Shardha took charge of arrangements swiftly. Rituals were completed without delay. Ritvik followed procedures with precision, showing controlled grief. There were no emotional outbursts, no visible cracks. To outsiders, it looked like a tragic but unfortunate loss. Obesity became the accepted reason, and sympathy flowed easily. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. The speed with which everything was handled raised no alarms at the time, yet it would later stand out as unusual. Aanshi's personal belongings were sorted quickly. Medical documents disappeared. The house was cleaned thoroughly, erasing traces of routine and habit. That night marked the end of Aanshi's life, but also the beginning of consequences that no one inside the house could fully predict. The calmness that followed her death felt unnatural, as if something unfinished lingered in the air. Ritvik felt a strange sense of relief mixed with fear. Shardha remained firm, believing the hardest part was over. The neighborhood returned to normal within days. Snow melted, life continued, and the case appeared closed. Yet the truth had not disappeared. It had only been buried under assumptions and silence. One overlooked detail, one unnoticed inconsistency, remained hidden, waiting for the right moment to surface. This night was meant to end everything. Instead, it quietly set the stage for exposure. What was written as a medical tragedy would soon be questioned. The silence that protected the crime would not last forever. The days after Aanshi's death passed quietly, but not unnoticed by everyone. While family and community members accepted the explanation without question, an insurance review process began as part of standard procedure. Aanshi's life insurance policy was unusually large for someone her age and employment status. This alone did not prove wrongdoing, but it created curiosity. The claim was processed quickly, perhaps too quickly, and this speed attracted attention. An insurance investigator began reviewing Aanshi's medical history. Records showed a pattern that did not fully match the official cause of death. There were no long-term hospitalizations or documented chronic conditions severe enough to explain such a sudden collapse. The obesity was real, but it did not explain everything. The investigator noticed that recent medical visits were missing, despite signs that Aanshi had been unwell for weeks. This discovery led to further review. Pharmacy records revealed purchases of supplements and substances that were not prescribed by any licensed doctor. Some of these were known to cause severe reactions if misused. The timing of these purchases aligned closely with the decline in Aanshi's health. What was once considered routine care now appeared questionable. Authorities were informed, and the case quietly reopened. Investigators approached the situation cautiously, aware that there were no signs of physical violence. They focused instead on patterns. Ritvik's financial records were examined. The insurance policy, recent changes in beneficiaries, and financial stress from his job formed a troubling picture. What looked like responsibility now appeared calculated. Shardha's role also came under scrutiny. Her extended stay, control over household routines, and influence over medical decisions raised concerns. Investigators discovered online searches connected to extreme weight loss methods and unregulated substances. These searches were traced back to the home's internet connection. The consistency of the research suggested planning rather than accident. A toxicology report became the turning point. Advanced testing revealed traces of substances that weaken the body over time. The dosage indicated repeated exposure, not a single mistake. This finding directly contradicted the natural death conclusion. Obesity could no longer explain the results. The narrative began to collapse. Ritvik was called in for questioning. His calm demeanor did not help his case. He struggled to explain the medications and routines imposed on Aanshi. His answers felt rehearsed and lacked emotional depth. Financial motives became clearer with every response. Shardha, questioned separately, denied responsibility, but could not explain her involvement in health decisions. The Indian community that once offered sympathy now reacted with shock. Whispers replaced condolences. A death that seemed unfortunate now appeared intentional. Media attention followed, turning the private tragedy into a public investigation. Every detail of Aanshi's life was re-examined. The truth emerged slowly but firmly. Obesity was not the cause, but the cover. Emotional neglect, manipulation, and control had paved the way for something far more sinister. What had been buried under routine and silence was now exposed. The case moved toward arrest, and the story shifted from loss to accountability. The cracks that began with a single insurance review widened into a full investigation. The silence that once protected the crime finally broke, and the truth, long ignored, demanded to be seen. The investigation revealed layers of deception that shocked even seasoned officers. Ritvik's carefully constructed image of a responsible husband began to unravel. Detailed toxicology reports confirmed repeated exposure to harmful substances, which had gradually weakened Aanshi's body. The timeline of her decline matched purchases of supplements and medications that were never prescribed. Obesity, once cited as the cause of death, had been nothing more than a convenient excuse. Shardha's involvement also became undeniable. Her influence on Ritvik, her control over household routines, and her insistence on extreme measures contributed directly to Aanshi's deterioration. Investigators discovered that she had researched methods to accelerate weight loss and manage physical decline in unconventional ways. Her online searches and her presence during critical moments revealed that she had played a guiding role, shaping Ritvik's decisions. Far from being an uninvolved grandmother figure, she had been an active conspirator. Arrest warrants were issued, and Ritvik and Shardha were taken into custody. The Indian community in Ohio was stunned. Friends and neighbors who had once expressed sympathy now spoke in hushed tones about betrayal and manipulation. The seemingly perfect couple was revealed as a facade masking a calculated crime. The media coverage amplified the shock, and the story spread beyond local boundaries, drawing attention from national news channels. The trial that followed exposed details that horrified everyone. Experts testified about the substances used and the physical effects on Aanshi. Psychologists analyzed the psychological abuse she had endured over months, emphasizing how emotional neglect, combined with physical manipulation, created a lethal environment. Friends and distant family members shared stories of Aanshi's early dreams and hopes, highlighting the stark contrast between her aspirations and the tragic reality she faced. Evidence showed that Aanshi's trust had been exploited. She had complied with every routine, followed every suggestion, and endured every criticism, believing that obedience and effort would restore harmony. Instead, those very actions had been used against her, making her vulnerable and accelerating her decline. The house that once seemed orderly and calm had become a place of quiet danger. During the sentencing, the court described the crime as a mixture of calculated planning, emotional manipulation, and betrayal of trust. Ritvik was convicted of murder, and Shardha was convicted as a conspirator. The judge emphasized that the motive went beyond frustration with obesity. It was rooted in control, power, and financial calculation. Obesity had been a convenient cover, but the true crime was far deeper, highlighting how manipulation and neglect can escalate into irreversible harm. The story of Aanshi Malhotra became a cautionary tale for the community. It forced reflection on the pressures faced by immigrants, the impact of isolation, and the dangers of silent abuse. Her death reminded people that appearances can be deceiving and that what seems like ordinary household struggles may conceal hidden dangers. In the end, Aanshi's story left a permanent mark. It was a tragic reminder that trust can be weaponized, that family influence can become control, and that the consequences of silence and neglect can be fatal. The truth, once revealed, showed that her life had been stolen under the guise of care, leaving a legacy of warning for all who might ignore the subtle signs of danger within the walls of a home.